Yehuda ben Rivka, and Yaakov Shmuel ben Chana. We should all have a refuah shalema. So Shar Chayil Yisrael. Okay, I just wanted to start off by saying that today is a couple of famous yortzeit. Today was the yortzeit of Rabbi Lezer Gordon Rashiv of Telz. Today was also the yortzeit of one of my favorite people, Menachem Begin. And I should have really prepared the YouTube clip of Menachem Begin saying to somebody who was trying to tell them to give up on certain security needs. And if you're going to make krum with the nose, make krum with the nose. I don't care. We have to stand up for ourselves. There's a beautiful video clip of Menachem Begin protesting that he's not going to let the UN bully him into any concession. And it's also the yortzeit of a famous Hasidic tzaddik by the name of Ablei Psudis. But if for Hasidim call him Ablei Psudis, but his name is Ablei Psora. And he's named after his mother. He took on his mother's first name as his last name. And the reason why he did that is because when his mother was like 15 years old, the Poritz's son wanted to marry her. And she, of course, didn't want to marry a Shegitz. So she had to find somebody quickly to marry. In the little village that they were, there were no young eligible bachelors. So she ended up grabbing some old man to marry just to save her from marrying the Poritz's son, which was a tremendous act of Mesiras Nefesh. Because he wasn't rich. It's not like she was going to wait till he would die and she could be a waiter. She wasn't rich either. So she ended up sacrificing, her life to marry someone who she really would rather not have married to avoid a situation where she had to be married to a non-Jew. So he took on his mother's first name as his last name. I'm sorry? Yeah, he was born from that. Yeah. So his name is Ablei Psudis, and he what he used to do is he used to go around raising money, and he would support the Lamed Vav Tzadikim. How did he know who the Lamed Vav Tzadikim was? I think he spoke to Moshe Sharf. I think Moshe Sharf probably told him who the Lamed Vav Tzadikim were. Anyway, so we have a story in our family. He actually saved my grandfather's life once upon a time. He was the one, everyone heard of Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Mikalev. Anybody who ever went to Hungary, davened probably by his kever, the Kalev Rebbe. The Kalev Rebbe was just an orphan, and he was once shepherding some sheep in the meadows, and the Ablei Psudis encountered him. Ablei Psudis was a Talmud he's a contemporary of the Mezritcher Maggid, and he saw that this boy had a darheben in the Neshama. So he told the mother of the child, I'll pay you whatever you need, but I need to take your son and take him to Reb Shmelkim in Nikolsburg, who's also one of the Mezritcher Maggid's Talmidim, so he should learn by him. And that's what happened. And he became Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac of Kalev, a Yitu at Gili Elio every day. Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac of Kalev at Gili Elio every single day. And one day, this Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac of Kalev was very friendly with my great-grandfather going back 8 generations. I'm sorry? Well, that's my grandfather and the Kalev Rebbe. That's a different story. So my great-great-great-grandfather, he's a very wealthy guy. He lived in the outskirts of Kalev, and he was one of the people responsible for getting this Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac to be the Rebbe in Kalev as well. Because even though he was a great man, he was once traveling, and he ended up staying by my great-great-great-grandfather for like 6 weeks. He stayed in his house. And after the 6 weeks, my grandfather told him, I really want you to become Rebbe in this city. He says, no, I'm not becoming Rebbe. So my grandfather said, okay, no problem. You owe me $4,562.23 for 6 nights, 6 weeks room and board, 7 movie rentals, room service, and he gave him a full list. So the Rebbe says, where am I supposed to get the money from? He says, you can work it off if you want. And that's how he became Rebbe. So he was involved in the extortion of forcing the Kalev Rebbe to take on the Rabbanos. So anyway, one day, Rabbi Psudis comes into town, and he stays by my grandfather, and he tells my grandfather, go to the Poritz right now and tell him Leibel wants to talk to him. So that's like you going to knock on Mayor Tori's door and tell him Chaim Yankel wants to talk to him. Like, my grandfather's like, you can't just walk in.
It's in Moshe Sharf.
So he says, if you don't go, I'll go. So my grandfather went, and surprisingly to him, they just let him right in. And he told the Poritz, Leibel says wants to talk to you. And the Poritz said, okay, I'm coming right over. And he got dressed and he came. So nobody knows what's going on. He comes in, he went into a private room with our Leibel Source. They spoke for about an hour. I have no idea what they spoke about. And when he came out, the Leibel Source points to my grandfather and says, you see that man? If you ever need to buy a horse, he is an expert in horses. If you want to go to a horse market, you take him along. My grandfather looks at him and says, like, what are you talking about? That was the first thing about horses. But he didn't say nothing, he doesn't know what's going on. So it didn't take long after that. My grandfather employed many goyim, and a Christian teenager who worked for him disappeared. And of course, several eyewitnesses showed up that said that my grandfather bludgeoned him to death to use for matzahs, and it was a full-blown blood libel against my grandfather. And they had set up a trial date, and he was indicted, and he was waiting for trial. So during this period of time, the parish knocks on his door one day and says, "Mr. Fish, we got to go buy some horses. I heard you know how to buy. You're an expert in horses." So my grandfather said, "Oh, okay, I'll come with you." Like he didn't know what was going on. So they'll go in this parish's coach, and they pull up to there's a little village, a little bit away from this city, where the market for horses was being held. And as they're pulling into the city, the parrot sees the little kid, the subject, the victim of the murder, sitting like homeless, abandoned on a curb in the city. So he stops his coach and he tells the kiddo, "Are you so and so from Caleb?" He said, "Yeah." "What are you doing here? Come on in." So the kid says, "The reason why I'm here," he started crying, "it's because the Galach told me that I must run to this city, and if I come back within a year, he's going to kill me and my whole family. And I want to go home, and I'm lonely, and I'm homeless over here." So the parrot says, "No problem. You come in to my wagon, I'll take care of you." I don't know what happened with the horse, but I know that they got home, and he stayed by the parrot's house. And by the trial, the parrots attended the trial, and of course they had all the eyewitnesses declaring that this Yid bludgeoned a Christian child to death. And then, as they're about to do the final closing arguments, the parrot said, "I have another witness who wants to say testimony." So everyone said, "Of course, of course." And they opened the door, and this little kid walks in, and he said his story, and my grandfather was saved. So that was all because of a Bleib Sudas. So again, I don't know exactly how he knew, and he knew. I don't know how anyone knew anything. And my grandfather definitely didn't know how to buy horses. But at the end of the day, his life was saved because they were able to identify and find a Christian child that he was accused of killing. So we're really re-chewing the same shaila that we discussed on Friday, and that is if there's avelos betzina on Shabbos, referring to Tashmish. Boimin Rabbi Yochanan Mishmuel. Yesh avelos b'Shabbos or ein avelos b'Shabbos. Do you have to physically with avelos on Shabbos? Omer le, Shmuel said ein avelos b'Shabbos. There's no avelos b'Shabbos, meaning dvarm shebetzina would be mutter. Rabbi Yochanan didn't hold like that, and we'll see Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold like that. But Shmuel is paskening that Tashmish is mutter on Shabbos for a novel. We're going to soon see that not following Hilchos Avelos can come with some severe bite, and we'll soon see what this is referring to. It could be a little graphic at times. I hope you don't have any minors around you. This is not a Gemara for minors. Yosy Rabbanon Kabei de Rapapa. The Rabbanon were sitting around Rapapa. The Ka'ambi Mishmei de Shmuel, and they said over in the name of Shmuel, Oval Shashimish Mitosai Bimei Evloi, and Oval who was Mishamish Mitosai during his week of Avelos, Chayiv Misa, is Chayiv Misa. Why would he be Chayiv Misa? So they were trying to explain it's because someone who's over in Divrei Chachamim is Chayiv Misa. It's Misha B'dei Shemayim. Omer Rapapa said that's not what happened. Osir Itmar. No one said Chayiv Misa. It was said that it's merely Osir. Umishmeid Rabbi Yochanan Itmar. And it was said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that Tashmish is not. The Tashmish is Osir. And Rabbi Kiva Eger asked from Gilyon Hashas, why would I need Rabbi Yochanan to tell me that Tashmish is Osir? B'mei Evloi, it's a Meforsh Mishnah. V'ish mi'elechu mishmei de Shmuel. And if you heard anything in the name of Shmuel, where Papa said, you definitely didn't hear that he said he's Chayiv Misa for doing Tashmish. But I'll tell you what Shmuel might have said. Hachi Shmuelechu. Omer B'tachlichu Barvimei Shmuel. Ovel Shaloi Para V'loi Pirim. And Ovel, who didn't let his hair grow and who didn't cover his hair, who didn't rise Kriya. If he didn't rise Kriya and he didn't cover his head, he didn't let his hair grow and he didn't rise Kriya, that's Chayiv Misa. Shenamar, because it says in the pasuk, when the Rebbeinu Shalom instructed Aaron HaKohen and his remaining surviving children about how they should not keep avelos over Nadav Avihu who were nifter, Hashem told them, "Reshechem al tifro, uvegdechem lo yisafraim u'v'lo yisamusa." If you are going to fear zech ba'avelos, then you'll be chayiv misa as kohanim. But we could be medayik ha'achar shaloi para v'lo pirim, a Yisrael who didn't follow the halachas of avelos, chayiv misa would be chayiv misa. So maybe that's what Shmuel said. And then right away Tosfos says you can't make such a diak from this pasuk. Zogt Tosfos, the second Tosfos on the top of the Amud. Afal Gav, the Pasha, the Krah, is to be Medayik Achar Parei Ufarim. All you learn from there is that Yisrael does make Priu Prima. V'emhemi Yasu, and if Kaihanim will do Priu Prima Yamusu. But there's no diuk to say that a Yisrael who didn't do Priya Prima will be Chayiv Misa. So Tosfos, you're right. Nira da Smachta Ba'almahu. It's not really a raya from the pasuk. It's just a remes. The Leimaisilu Soifek Nesrofim Gabelu Shiva Misa. In Sanhedrin, it doesn't list someone who doesn't follow the Hilchas Avelus as someone who's Chayiv Misa. So Avada is not Chayiv Misa. Zok to Gemara Vayter. Amar Rafram Bar Papa. And this is where it gets a little bit graphic. Tana, we learned, Be'evel Ravosi in Masechtas Avelus, Masechtas Smachos, it says, Avel Asher L'Shamish Mitasai B'mei Evloi. An Avel may not be Mishamish while he's an Avel. Umaisa Be'echat Shashimish Mitasai B'mei Evloi. And once a person was Mishamish his Mita B'mei Evloi, and after that he was never ever able to be Mishamish Mitasai ever again. Why? Because Vishamtu Chazerim Eskviyosai. I don't know what happened. I don't know where pigs were doing there, but some pigs ended up running away with the tools that he needed to do the deed, and they ran away with it. So he's out of luck. So that's one shot. The other shot is they actually killed him and ate him up. So it's a shot of what could be also means. But whatever it is, he never was able to do tashmish again after that encounter. Okay, Zok Gemara Vayter. I don't even want to imagine exactly how this occurred. Zok Gemara Vayter. Amar Shmuel Pachaz Choiva, the three Hanhagas of Avelos that are represented by the letters Pechaz Zayin. On Shabbos, one may not do because they are Avelos B'Fahesha, which is not allowed on Shabbos. And Neser, the three Hanhagas of Avelos that are represented by these three letters, Rishus, those are not things that openly show Avelos, they're more B'Tzina, and therefore they're allowed to be done on Shabbos. So let's start with Pachaz. Priya Sarosh. Now, Priya Sarosh in this case does not mean letting your hair grow, because on Shabbos no one's taking a haircut anyway. It means that you wrap a shmata around you to cover your face. That you're not allowed to do because that's Avelos B'Fahesha. Chazaris Kra, Lachayrav. You have to cover over the Kriya. In other words, you shouldn't be displaying the Kriya because that's again Avelos B'Fahesha, the torn part of your clothing. And Skiv Samita, we know normally a noble turns his bed over. On Shabbos, he has to turn his bed back up because that's also something that's considered B'Fahesha. And the Rishonim tell us that in those days, I guess people were able to see people's beds. I'm not sure exactly how that was. Could be because they were exposed. I guess they didn't have bedrooms. They had it in the living room. Okay, Zoktamar Viter. Those are chayvah, which means you're not allowed to do those things on Shabbos because it's Avelos B'Fahesha. But Ni'ilas a sandal, not wearing shoes. Tashma Shemitah, Rechitz Yadayim, Raglayim, Bechamin, Arvis, to wash up before Shabbos, Rishus, those things you don't necessarily have to do, because if you don't keep them, people might not see that you're doing Bavelos. V'Rav Amar, Af Priyus Arosh Rishus. Priyus Arosh also, just because someone has his head covered with a shmata, that doesn't necessarily show Avelos. That's something that also normal people might do from time to time. Shmuel agrees that could be someone doesn't have to wear leather shoes on Shabbos to show that he's not a novel. The lav kula alma avidi the Simon Misanayu. Not everybody wears leather shoes. So the fact that this person is not wearing leather shoes on Shabbos don't prove that he's strings of Avelos. So it's not considered Avelos B'Fahesha. But Priya Sarosh Nami, Priya Sarosh as well. Lav kula alma avidu the magli v'shayu. Not everybody uncovers their head. Some people keep their heads wrapped in a shmata. So how does that show Avelos B'Fahesha? Why is it that Shmuel says that that's not allowed to be done on Shabbos? Tomorrow, because Shmuel Tamei, it all depends on what you call wrapping your head. Shmuel is a Taliban when it comes to wrapping your head. And such radical wrapping, someone would only do if they're a novel. And that's what's not allowed to be done on Shabbos. Damar Shmuel, two halachas. The first halacha is not relevant to our subject matter. The second halacha is. So the first halacha is, Kol Kra She'eni B'Shas Chimum. Any kriya that's not at the time of the death, any kriya. You're not Yosy, there's no reason to rise kriya unless it's right at the time of the death. And V'chal Atifa, She'eni Kativa Shishmeilim. And Atifa, wrapping your head, that's not like the way Yishmaelim do it, which is completely covered, like the Taliban in Atifa. So therefore, Shmuel said that you're not allowed to do if you're a noble. You know why? Because that'll be so obvious that you're doing it because of the Avelos. And what exactly is this high level of covering? Machli Rabbi Nachman, he demonstrated what it means. Ad Goved Dikna, which Rashi says until your jawbone even lower than your mouth. So it literally covering over your whole face. Now, this is a little bit of a shaila in the Achronim, because they discuss this same atifa lagabi wearing your talis. And the Mishabura says it's impossible that atifas Yishmaelim is how you're covering yourself over in a talis. It also doesn't make sense to say that atifas Yishmaelim means that their face is fully covered over. The Mishabura says you don't find anywhere that Yishmaelim have guide dogs or have people guiding them where to go. And if they were wearing a shmata over their head, they would surely need somebody to show them where to go. So the Mishabura says could be it's wrapping his jaw and his mouth by wrapping the scarf around on the lower side and maybe covers it over till his eyes, but it's not the mamish completely covering your face like a hood. Amr Rabbi Yaakov, Amr Rabbi Yochanan. Lo shanu, this halacha that we're saying that you're not allowed to do a tifa on Shabbos, that's only elo she'ein lo min alayim beraglo. Not if you're not wearing leather shoes. But if you're wearing leather shoes on Shabbos, then we're not so concerned. Even if someone's wearing a shmata, it's clear to anybody who looks at him that he's not being noig a minig of avelos on Shabbos. He's wearing shoes. So wearing shoes stands out, tells you that he's not doing avelos, which gives him the flexibility to do other things that might be avelos because his shoes shows that he's not enough. Toshus asked the kasha, if that's the case, well, then any one of these items should be a very good raya. So let's see Toshus, the fourth Toshus on the Ovid. Just like wearing shoes proves that he's not freeing avelis. Any one of these items, if he didn't do it, should show that he's not avelis. He doesn't make a tifa that shows he's not avelis. So then let him wear shoes. Let him not wear shoes. Then no one's going to think he's a novel. As long as he does one thing that shows he's not a novel, so then all the other things that are wishy-washy he should be able to do. Come to that really there's only one of these three items that you can't do because you need one thing to show that you're not free of avelis. Zok no, it's only wearing shoes that demonstrates you're not a novel. When you're wearing shoes, that's a much bigger showing of non-avelis. Other things aren't as in your face, aren't as obvious, and therefore it's only wearing shoes where Rabbi Yochanan said that if you wear shoes, then you don't have to be so worried about the other in your avelis because everyone will know that you're not praving avelis. Yes.
The very first words in the Gemara we had today is that Shmuel Paskins that ain't avelis b'Shabbos.
Correct.
And now we just said that he says that Tachma Shemitah is Rishus. Means you could do it, you could not do it. Meaning that there'd be some reason not to do it. If there's ain't avelis b'Shabbos, then what's the language of Rishus?
So you're saying you should be mechuyev to?
Rishus means that there would be a mila, maybe if you didn't do it. That's what all these things seem.
In the context of our Gemara, Rishus means that even though it's a hanhaga of avelos, we're not concerned with you doing it because it's betzina. So even if you refrain from Tashma Shamita on Shabbos, we're not concerned because it's betzina and it won't be advertising to the world that you're in avelos on Shabbos.
But if there's ain't avelis b'Shabbos, then why is that a concern?
Because you're not allowed to show it. It's not covered for Shabbos to act ba'avelis on Shabbos. So therefore, anything that will demonstrate that you're ba'avelis is not allowed on Shabbos. These three items, even if you do them, aren't so obviously advertising that you're ba'avelis. So it's not a contradiction to Shabbos. So I think that's what it just means that doing any one of these actions, refraining from Tashma Shemitah, refraining from wearing leather shoes, refraining from washing, doesn't show as strongly avelos. So that's not called avelos prefer hesher. So therefore, you'd be allowed to do it if you would want to. So rishus doesn't mean you're allowed to do tashmish. Over you're allowed to refrain from tashmish. That won't be a problem advertising that you're doing avelos.
Who advertises this anyway? It's not an area where people advertise.
That's the whole point. That's why whether someone engages or doesn't engage is not relevant because no one will know. It's betzina. That's exactly the point. These things are all betzina. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. So now we're going to go back to the second halacha that we quoted from Shmuel. And the second halacha was kol kra she'ena b'shas chilim, a kriya that's not at the time of the death. Any kra, you're not yotze kriya. That's not a good kriya. For the Gemara, I'm going to show you two examples of people who write kriya that was not at the time of the death. Well, Amrulay Shmuel, they once told Shmuel, noch nach shvei the Rab. Rab was nifter. Kara alay trace her money. Shmuel tore, he writes kriya on 12 begodim. So you see right over here that this didn't happen when Rav died. This happened when Shmuel heard about it. So according to Shmuel, that's not a kriya. Why did Shmuel Taka write kriya? Omar, he said, Ozal Gavra, a person passed away, who I was afraid of him. And Rashi says, Mistafina I was afraid of him because he asked me good kashas, the kushas. He would ask good kashas on me. What does this mean? So he brings down from the Tosfos Arosh, a beautiful little line. So the Tosfos Arosh Klaimer, since I was so afraid of Rav, before I would ever talk on learning with him, I would think it over and over and over to be crystal clear, to make sure I had my information clear. I would not take it lightly. I would really analyze everything very clearly. But now, who am I going to be afraid of? Who's going to chop me up if I make a mistake? I might make a lot of mistakes now that I'm not going to be as careful because I don't have Rav around. And then I'm going to cause people to do averis because I'm going to pass them wrong, because I'm not so concerned about my psukim being checked. Therefore, nimtza hu hayi mezaka oisi. Kum to Rav was mezaka me all this time, and therefore I'm writing kriya for him. Another story of someone who writes kriya not by the death. He tore 13 begodim made out of milk, which is a very expensive fabric. Amari said the same thing. Also Gavra, Davim is Tafina. So you see over there, you write kriya even though it's not at the time of death. So Kamar, that's different. Shiny Rabbanon are different. The Chivan the Chol Shaita Mitkrish Matayu Kshas Chivan Domini. Since every time we remember a halacha that they say, a Dvar Torah that they said, so we're constantly losing them, because every time we recall a psak, a lumdus, a shtikal Torah that they said, we feel that loss raw and fresh, and therefore kriya could be torn even if it's not at the time of death. Your Talmud said, you know which Talmud? Rav Amram. And this is what he said. Tanya, we looked in the Brisa. Ovel kol shiva, kairi lefana. The Ovel, all 7 days, his kriya has to be exposed for everyone to see. And if he wants to change his clothes, those who put him inside out, he puts in a new pair of clothes, he has to rash kriya again. So again, this is going to be a kasha. You see right away that he changed his clothes. Obviously, there wasn't the time of death anymore, and he's rashing kriya again. So you have a raya from here that you could rash kriya even not at the time of death. On Shabbos, he could keep the tear concealed. And if he wants to change into another set of clothing, he doesn't have to rash kriya on the begodim that he's going to wear on Shabbos. So tomorrow, you're right. There also you rash kriya not at the time of death. Sure, by the mother and the father, by a parent, one could rash kriya even not at the time of death. That's also called shas chimum. But when we say kriya is only kriya b'shas chimum, is one of the other relatives. This kriya that one rashes kriya for their parents, misachin or ein misachin, can they be sewed up afterwards? Zakamar pligiba avua Rabbi Oishia, the father of Oishia. I don't know what his name was, but it was Rabbi Oishia's father. Ubar kapara and bar kapara. Chad Omar, one of them said, ein misachin, you cannot sew it up. The Chad Omar misachin. Zok Gemara, let's see if we can figure out who said what. Tistayim the avua de Rabbi Oishia, the Omar ein misachin. Let's argue that it was a father of Rabbi Oishia who said ein misachin. How would I know? Because his son repeated it. The Omar Rabbi Oishia ein misachin. Miman shmiolei. Who would Rabbi Oishia have heard it from? Lav me'avua. Would he not have heard it from his father? So if that's Rabbi Oishia's opinion, it's likely to say that was his father's opinion. Zok Gemara, that's not at all true. Mi bar kapor Rabbi shmiolei. Who's he going to quote from? His father or his Rebbe? For sure his Rebbe. Somebody once told me, someone who's married have daughters and sons. I've only married have daughters. But someone who married have daughters and sons once told me that your daughter, when she's going out and she has questions, she's going to ask you and she'll take your advice. Your son, if when he asks his Rosh Hashiva advice, he mentions what your opinion was as part of his question, then maybe that's considered a really lucky father. If he Agav mentions what you said. So you see again, the Gemara says, what father? When father? He said it over from his rabbi, not from his father. Someone once told me, a mother once told me that Rav Brodsky called her, and Rav Brodsky asked her, your son came to ask me this question about a shidduch. I'm not so foolish to think that I know better than you. Tell me what I should tell him. For me, he'll take it. Gewaltig. Zog the Gemara weiter. Amar Rava, Oval Mitayel Ba'unkali B'Soich Pesach. On Shabbos, an oval is allowed to walk around with his torn clothing. Again, it's in his house, no one sees it. Abaye Achshechel Rabbi Yosef, the Paris Le Sudra Reshe. Abaye once saw Rabbi Yosef on Shabbos walking around with his head covered, meaning that was one of the Simon Avelis. But also he was walking around in the privacy of his home. Amar Le, so Abaye told Rabbi Yosef, Lav Sovel or Mar, Ein Avelis B'Shabbos. Don't you hold there's no Avelis B'Shabbos? Why are you wearing the shmater? Amar Le, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Devarim Shebetzina Noyeg. Devarim Shebetzina, you're allowed to keep Avelis on Shabbos, and that's why Rabbi Yochanan knows that Tashmish is also. Tosus quoted this on Chav Gimel Amud Beis that here you see Rabbi Yochanan knows that Tashmish will be also on Shabbos. Let's see Tosus who sort of summarizes the subject. Hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Dvarim Shebetzina Noyeg. Pasak Ba'alachas Kedolos Rabbi Yochanan. We pass like Rabbi Yochanan that Dvarim Shebetzina is Noyeg, which is L'chomra by Avelis. And we know you always go by the Mekel by Avelis. So Tosus is going to deal with that. Lafukim Rav Shmuel Damar La'il that Tashmish Hamita is Rishus. Udvarim Shebetzina, it's Dvarim Shebetzina. Uber Perkamad Exubis Nami Kamer Allah Messiah Rabbi Yochanan the Baye Verb Shabbik Kavose. Frek Tosus Akasha. V'yaf Agav the Kaimelon Halacha Kediver Mekel. Since we pass in the halacha Kediver Mekel, so why are we passing like Rabbi Yochanan L'chumra that Tashmish is also for novel? Why don't we pass like Shmuel's Mekel? Zok Gemara Zok Tosus a big chiddush. The whole rule of halacha Kediver Mekel Babel is Hanamili b'Machloekes Shel Tanoim. And the Machloekes Tanoim we pass like the Mekel. Aval Miltad Amaroi. Here we have a discussion between Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel and Rav. Loi Amran. We don't say halacha Kediver Mekel Babel. Big chiddush. Now, Toshus Masavkali, I have a suffix, I'm unsure. Since these things of Avelos, we say, are allowed in the privacy of your home on Shabbos, Toshus is wondering, you have an osir in the ilas sandal b'tzina b'chol shar dvarim. Would somebody be allowed not to wear shoes in the privacy of his home on Shabbos when he's in home? And Toshus is not sure. If someone confused it with that type of availance. Okay, let's see the Gemara back. So we have to review because we had a three-way machlokes in our Mishnah about what we know that Shabbos is oil the yes.
Just a quick going back to that first Gemara. If Rabbi Yochanan has an opinion, so why did he ask the question? It was Boy Minei Rabbi Yochanan, Mishmuel. So why is he asking if he has his own opinion?
That's a good question. Let's look at the first Toshus but let's see if it helps us. Rabbi Yochanan asked Shmuel a question. Miu Rabbi Yochanan lekibel mishmuel. He didn't accept Shmuel's answer. The use svirlei dvarim shebetzina noy kedepishloyo. So Toshus doesn't answer your question, but Toshus reiterates the facts that even though Rabbi Yochanan asked Shmuel the question, he didn't accept Shmuel's answer. So you're asking me if he had an opinion before he asked Shmuel, why did he ask Shmuel in the first place? Well, I'm sorry, he wanted to know Shmuel's opinion. Oh, okay. Or maybe first he didn't have an opinion, he asked Shmuel, and then he pondered it, and then he decided that he doesn't agree with Shmuel. But it's a good aura. It's a good aura. Okay, so let's go back to the Mishnah on Yud Testament Aleph. The Mishnah discusses what's mafsek and what's not mafsek. So we said in Tisha Amru, Shabbos oila bein mafsekes. Shabbos is oila to the Shiva. It counts as one of the days of Shiva, and it's not going to be mafsek the Shiva, but for a golem, mafsek bein the Rabbi Eliezer Omer, the first sheet of the Mishnah is Mishachar Beis Hamikdash Atzeres is Shabbos. Since Atzeres is no longer 7 days, because you don't bring karbonos, Atzeres is like Shabbos, meaning oil bein mafsek. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim k'regalim. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are like regalim, and Kol Shekain Shavuos is like a regal. So Rabbi Gamliel holds that Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Atzeres is like a regal, and it'll be mafsek and it won't be oil. So if I asked you between these three shitas, who is the most makel? What would you say? Who's the most makel? I would say Rabbi Gamliel is the most makel because he holds everything is mafsik, right? So if he's makel and Toshva says, when do you say Allah Kedir makel bubble by Bachlekes Tanoim? This fits the bill. So the rule, this should be a classic textbook case of halacha ke makel by abel, which means you should pass like a Gamliel right off the bat that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and Atzeres are mafsik vein oil. No, but we know that you pass on negative right. No, we pass on Gamliel, but we pass on negative right when it comes to that was one of the Rishonim say you even go negative right by halacha kedir makel bubble because the shaila was. There was a shaila. Why do I need to lock even make a bubble? I it's their button anyway. Subject to a button kula. So one of the Rishonim said it's because even if you have a roiv and normally you go bus a roiv, when it comes to Avelis, you even go according to a meat connected roiv. Okay, so I just want to point that out because it's going to be relevant in just a moment. So let's see the Eilig Gemara. Rabbi Lezer Mishachar Beis Hamikdash. Amar Rav Gidel Bar Menashe Amar Shmuel Halacha Rabbi Gamliel. Halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel. He paskins. So let's have a look at these Toshis. He's just telling us Pashup Pshat. Atzeres Keshabbos, v'chol shekain. So Rabbi Gamliel said Atzeres. I'm sorry. Rabbi Lezer said Atzeres is Keshabbos, and Kol shekain Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are like Shabbos. But Rabbi Gamliel Omer Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim Kirigalim, v'chol shekain Atzeres lachar Korban. So basically, what we're saying here is that Rabbi Gamliel held that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and Atzeres is mafsek vein oila. Okay. Halacha Rabbi Gamliel. Frek Toisvus. Tema. Even though Shmuel halacha kediver mekel b'obel, Shmuel said halacha kediver mekel b'obel. So that encompasses already this psak. So why did Shmuel have to specify in this case Amar Shmuel halacha Gamliel? His general rule already tells us that we pass like Gamliel. And my yitzchak lemivsek halacha Gamliel. The Yishlomer Zaktoisvis. Beautiful. I asked you before who was the most mekel of the three, and we all agreed that it was Rabbi Gamliel the most mekel because he holds everything's mafsik. Zok Tosh is sometimes holding that something's a regal could be a chumrah, not a kula. Why? The Yeshlomi the chumrah namihi didn't cover samach lechashecha. What if someone was buried, the mace was buried right at nightfall, coming into Shavuos, and they couldn't start the avelis on their Shavuos. So then it's ein oila. So now it's the chumrah because now what's going to happen is you cannot count Shavuos as day one. You have to start counting day one and the day after Shavuos. So there it comes out of Chumrah. So that's why Shmuel had to pass like Rabbi Gamliel, because Rabbi Gamliel isn't always a Kula, sometimes it's a Chumrah, and Shmuel's trying to tell us that we pass like Rabbi Gamliel even when he comes out as a Chumrah. Zog to the more weiter. The Iga de Masni, the Hadar of Gidel Bar Menashe, and some people say that Rabbi Gidel Bar Menashe never said over from Shmuel a psak halacha about Atzeres, rather it's a completely irrelevant, different halacha. Tragic. Kol lamed joim. If a child dies never before a child is 30 days, Rahman al Tinnik yaitza bechek, they can just carry the baby out without any type of oren or box or receptacle. And the nikbar be'isha achas u'shnei anoshim. You don't need a minion. You can have one woman and two men who are going to do the kfura. Avaloi be'isha achas u'shnei anoshim. But you cannot have one man with two women because that would be a problem of yichud. That would be a problem of yichud. However, Dr. Gemara, Abba Shol is more mekel, and he says, Af beish echad ushtei nashim. Even normally, one man cannot be with two women, but when you're bearing a child, one man could be with two women. Why is that? Zok Toisvis, Af agav the ein ish echad misyachad im shtei nashim, b'shas havelis the treat shari. The environment and the background is not conducive to doing that type of avera. They're in the middle of bearing a child, so therefore Abba Shol is more mekel. Yeah, it's not exactly the ambiance. It doesn't exactly have that Valentine's Day type of mood. The ein oimdim alav b'shura. When an oval finishes bearing the mace, so we know in the basic forest, there's usually the people there line up in two rows, and the oval walks in between the rows, and they're menachem. So that's not done for a child that's less than 30 days old. They used to say a bracha in the street. They used to say a bracha in those days, but this wouldn't apply to such a child. And there's no shiva. People are not coming to be Menachem Avos when it's such a young child. But Ben Shloshim, once the child is already 30 days old, then Yotze b'deluskama, they put the child in a little box. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, loy deluskama hanitelas bekasef, not a small box that you can carry it on your shoulder, one person. Ela hanitelas bakapayim, it needs to be a big enough of a box that it takes two people to carry it. Rachman l'tzlan. V'aimdim alav b'shura, and there it does have the halachas of avelis. So the Aval walks through the row of people who are Menachemim, and they say Birchas Avelim, and he sits shiva for 7 days, and people come, to be Menachem Aval. Then Yud Chodesh, what if the child's already 12 months old? Then he's Yotze b'mita. Then they don't put it in a box, then they put it in a bed like the stretchers that they carry Mason in Eretz Yisrael, which is really heart-wrenching, because you actually see the body. It's not enough that if he's a year old, you still don't take him up a mita unless he's very big. He's a very big child. Ben Shana ve'vorv k'ven shtayim. He looks like a 2-year-old. Or who ben shtayim, or if the child is actually 2 years old, then even if ve'vorv k'ven shana, even if the child is small, he's in the 10th percentile, still yoytze b'mita. Rabbi Shimon Omer, what's the mila, or what's the feature of yoytze b'mita? A yoytze b'mita rabim matzivim alav. And there's those who are gorish rabim tzvachim alav. So tzvachim alav means when people see them carrying a mace out on the bed, that creates that tugs at the heart, that creates sadness, and people start crying and screaming. So it generates crying and screaming. And the Ksaviyad Rashi also says matzivin would mean their faces turn green. In other words, their faces change colors from the tsar, from the agony, and it causes people to cry. So alavaya b'mita makes people cry more. It creates more of a crying for the mace, which the Ksaviyad Rashi is a covered gadol. She rabim is anchnalov. It's a great covered for a nifter if people are moaning and crying over his death by his levaya. But any yotze b'mita, if the nifter is not taken out of the bed, any rabim matzivin alav, it doesn't create that same reaction.
At what age do you stop with the mita then?
I'm sorry?
At what age do you stop the mita?
You don't stop. The mita, in Israel, they always only use a mita. Here in America, I think it's illegal, but for sanitary reasons. But in Israel, they just take them out on a stretcher.
Oh, I see. So
And it's more than that. Did you ever buy a burial in Israel? It's not like here where they have like two straps and they lower the box down. Someone jumps in and they literally hand it down.
right.
The Hebrews there earn their pay.
Why do they wait till a year or two old? Why not after Lamed Yom?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure why they don't. I'm not sure. But the next line in the Gemara might be a clue to answer that question. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Nikol Rabin. Let's say it's a shtickle toddler. It's not a child who never leaves the house. It's a child who goes out and plays. So people know the child. People recognize the child. People maybe even had an interaction with the child. For sure, the candy man, Rabin is asking Imoy. Then a lot of people are going to come to the Levaya because they know they have a connection. So maybe that's why the older the child is, the more people know him, the more people would have had interactions with the child, the more it would be relevant, and the more people would be tzibruchin. So maybe that's why. Once the child is already older and people had interactions with the child, so then you put it in a mita because people who recognize the child will be very broken over it. Maybe a very young baby, people don't know anyway, so there's no reason to do it. But that's just a guess. Your cash is in the cash. Umahen behesped. How old does a child have to be before you make a hesped? Rav Meir says in the name of Rabbi Shmuel, Ani midnei shalosh, poor families, they'll be masked with their child when the child's 3 years old. Ashurim, wealthy families, b'nei chamish, only when they're 5 years old. Strange, isn't it? So what's the difference? So Rashi says, Ani midnei shalosh, levisha ani mitzdar al bonav Yosy min asher, and Ani has more tsar when they lose a child than a wealthy person. You know why? Because they don't have any other toys. Anim don't have a Maserati, and they don't have a summer home, and they don't have all other things to distract them. So Mela, their child is everything, and therefore, at 3 years old already, it's a huge loss in their must be. But if you look at the art scroll points out that the reason why a child is more to a poor person, because a poor person to send his children to cheder, to raise the children, or do it with great mysterious nefesh. It's a big struggle for them to be able to afford the expenses of their child. So therefore, it rips their heart out when they lose a child, more than the gvir. Asher b'nei chamish. B'daimer mishmoi, aniyim b'nei chamish. No, even aniyim, only at 5 are you masbid. Asher b'nei sheish. We shouldn't even contemplate such tragic things. Uvenei zekenim, and what if you have an old couple who had a child? They're always considered kivnei aniyim. And them, you always must be at the lower age. I guess a ben zakunimo is so precious, that they're always considered b'nei that the hesped is earlier, 5 or 3, depending on who you learn on. Amar B'chil bar Menash Namarav, halachic Rabbi Yehuda she'amar mishum Rabbi Shmuel, which is aniyim b'nei chamesh, ashirim b'nei sheish, u'b'nei zekenim kivnei aniyim. It's hard to even learn these Gemaras. Darish Rabbanani bar Sosan. A pischa de Venesia. Rabbi Nani bar Sosan darshaned at the doorway of the Nosi's house. And this is what he darshaned. And before I learn this Gemara and everyone gets all tied up in a knot, if I know correctly, the Shulchan Aruch paskins, if someone dies after Yom Kippur, so Sukkot, the onset of Sukkot, that's the first Yom Tov, is Mevatel the Shiva. And then Shmini Atzeres, which is the next Yom Tov in line, is Mevatel the Shloshim. And that's it. After Yom Tov, you're done with the Shloshim, and the Avelis is over. If it's a regular relative, it's a parent, you're in the year. Our Gemara is going to sound a little bit different. What if Rachman someone sits Shiva for 1 day before Shavuos, and then Shavuos passes, Vatseres, Harekan Arba Osir. We say that he's already done 14 days, because the 1 day before Atzeres counts as a week, because that's the whole Shiva, right? And then Atzeres is also considered 7 days. So after Atzeres, we say he's already 14 days in, so therefore he only has 16 days left to the Shloshim. Shomer Rabami, when Rabami heard that Rabbanani darshan this, he got upset. Amar Atididei, was that your own Torah? The Rabbi Lezer Amar Rabbi Shehi. This is the words of Rabbi Lezer Amar Rabbi Shehi. Darish Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Akil de Reish Kalusa. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha also said something similar at the gate of the Reish Kalusa's house, and he said, "Yemechad of Ne'atzeres v'atzeres harekan arba also." Shomer Rabbi Sheish Ikbid again. He was makbid. Why? Amar Ati today. Is this your own Torah? The Rabbi Lazar Amar Rabbi Ishia. This is not your Torah. This is the Torah of Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Ishia. Amar Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Ishia minayin latzeres sheyesh latashlumin kol shiva. How do you know that at Atzeres, Shavuos, you could be mashed from the carbon kol shiva, and that's why we're saying it counts as 7 days. Shenemar b'chag hamatzos u'b'chag hashavuos u'b'chag hasukos, and we learn machag hamatzos yesh lat tashlumin kol shiva. You could bring the karbanos all 7 days. Af chag hashavuos yesh lat tashlumin kol shiva. Right? That's why we don't say tachanun for a week after Shavuos. Admer Rapapa or Avi Saba. Rapapa was talking to Avi Saba. The Dorish Nidarshan. Yoimechad lefnei Rosh Hashanah. If someone's at Shiva a couple of minutes before Rosh Hashanah, Vir Rosh Hashanah, Harekan Arba also, there's already 14 days gone. Amar Vina, Hilchach. Now, once we know this information, let's take it a step further. If someone's at Shiva for even 1 day before Sukkot, Vichag and Sukkot, Ushmina Shaloi, Harekan Eshem Vechad. You have 7, 7, and 7. So this is very difficult to understand, because what's 7, 7, 7? It's over. The Shloshim is over. So there's a lot of tumularai in the Rishonim. Tosfos asked the question, it's a long Tosfos. So Tosfos wants to say, Chumrah, that when do you say that the Yom Tov is Mevatel the Shloshim? That's if you had a real Shiva. But if you only had an abridged Shiva because of Yom Tov, then it's not Mevatel. We don't pass like that. The Shulchan Aruch paskins, no matter what the Shloshim is Batel. So the Ramban says, he argues with all the Rishonim who are trying to explain this Gemara, and he says this Gemara is Lav Davka. Avada, the Shmini Atzeres is going to be Mevatel Shloshim completely, and this Gemara is Lav Davka. Zok to Gemara Vayter. Ravina Ikla Lasura de Pras. Ravina showed up to Surah on the city of Pras, on the river of Pras. There's a yeshiva there. Omar Reb Chaviva Misura de Pras to Ravina. So Reb Chaviva, who lived there, told Ravina, Omar Mar, did you actually say that Yoy Mechad Lefnei Rosh Hashanah for Rosh Hashanah Reikan Arba Aser? Did you actually say that? Omar, no, I didn't say that. I'll tell you what I said, and then I'll tell you what people were medayik from what I said. I said, Ana Mistaver Rabbi Gamliel Hudamina. All I said that we probably pass like Rabbi Gamliel, who holds a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are considered Yom Tovim, that are mafsik the regel. After I said that, so people built on that Rosh Hashanah would be like 7 days, Yom Kippur would be like 7 days. But I didn't say that explicitly. Okay, and that takes us to the Mishnah. I want to wish everybody a good tavach, and the Rebbe should help that we learn about these things. It should be academic only, but just like when someone buys techrichim, when someone buys a plot, it's a school of Arich Hashem V'Shanim. We're learning about these terrible tzaras that are hard to contemplate. They should only be on the top, and we should never ever have to know from these things. Adrabah, our life should be the opposite extreme of Mali Simcha.
Yosy, why is Yantiv considered another 7 days? I understand the Erev Yantiv is like the Shiva. Why is it 7 days? Why do you get 14?
I'm not clear, but we know Pesach and Sukkot for sure are 7 days. They are 7 days. But we're trying to say even a Yom Tov that's only 1 day, like Shavuos, will be considered like 7 days. Because it's Iskus, Shavuos is compared to Sukkot and Pesach, right? That's why the Gemara said this is not your Torah. This is the Torah of Rabbi Elazar who says that Shavuos is just like a 7 day Yom Tov. So that's where it's from. The question is, how does it then get extended to Rosh Hashanah Kippur? Rosh Hashanah Kippur is not in this Hekesh. So I don't know how this got connected. I mean, you see in the Gemara, the Gamliel says Rosh Hashanah Kippur as well. I don't know where that comes from. It just says, but I don't know a makar why it should be that way.
But didn't Rabbi Gamliel say that Rosh Hashanah Kippur are like every other Yantiv?
How did he know that? Where did he get it from? In the Rabbi Shavuos, we know we have from Rabbi Shia. But where did Rabbi Gamliel get it from? I'm not sure what his makar is. I wonder if on your Testament Aleph, on the Mishnah, someone says anything about it. But I'm not sure where he gets that from.
He says it. So
yeah, he's a black and white. He's a black and white. But I'm not sure what is his makar. It must come from somewhere. Rabbi Gamliel must also have a makar. But I'm not sure.
Like this, he has his reason. That doesn't necessarily, you don't know always the reasoning.
We don't always know the reason. I don't know the reason. I do not know the reason. I don't know the reason for Rabbi Gamliel of why Rosh Hashanah Kippur should be just like.
Is it only by Avelis he's saying it's like Yantif and no other aspect, or in other aspects as well? Like you have to go to like the Pesach hotel on Rosh Hashanah Kippur too, is what?
There are people who do go.
Yeah, fantastic speakers. Ice fast. We're gonna have Yom Kippur. We're gonna have a barbecue on the beach. All right.
Yes. It's a bit of a, just because I forget his name already. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi said this whole shot about the Minayin Latzeres. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily follow that you gain 7 days. Maybe it takes all 7 days of the makeup. The 7 days are makeup. You're saying you're allowed to have Shavuos has 7 makeup days or 6 extra makeup days. So maybe it takes all 6 of those makeup 7 days to make the tashlumin to make the total of the 7 days of shleishim. Like it's not guaranteed that because it takes the place of 7 days, that therefore it takes the place of shleishim.
I hear your question. Like the lashon of Rashi, atzeres to have a b'mokum zayin yom. Atzeres is in the place of 7 days. You ask me, maybe the atzeres with the 6 days of tashlumin afterwards are b'mokum 7 days.
Yeah, I mean, Haraya. If it meant that Atzeres was all 7 days, then the second day, the day after Atzeres, you wouldn't be able to bring the Karma Chagiga. Because if it's all 7, it doesn't mean it's all 7 days. It means it continues. You could do makeups until the end of the 7th day.
I hear very much. That's right. But Moshe is asking, what's the story behind it? Why? I mean, so we both agree that's what the Gemara says, but the question is for us, right?
I'm trying to defend Ravani or whatever his name is, because they're teaching us a chiddush that who are the 2 people that they were ikped on. I'm saying those 2 people were being machad something.
Well, who said that you automatically apply the 7 days of Tashlumin, and that automatically it's understood from there that it's like 7 days of Avelis. That is a Kiddush. That is an extra step.
Right.
And why be upset at them for making that extra step? That's an extra step that you wouldn't know from a Belgian by Shalom.
Right.
The vice, the Reis, the people at times in them held it, it's one and the same.
And I'll tell you one more tiny little point from the same thing. So somebody should have been ikpid on Rav Papa also. Somebody should have been ikpid on Rav Papa, and somebody should have been ikpid on Ravina for the same ikpid, because they also are making the same stretch.
I hear. I don't know. I don't know the answer. It's a very good question. I don't know the answer.
I see plenty of room to consider differently.
No, I hear. I hear very stark. I don't know. I found this very difficult as well,
Fine, Shkayach.
especially Rosh Hashanah, right?
Even though, and if it were